Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to dominate your career, then you are in the right place. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, ex-Googler, diversity expert, and senior corporate leader. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success.
Hi, I'm Nikki Barua, your host for today's episode. When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you grow up thinking that you wanted to become an astronaut and then go off in a completely different direction? Well, in today's episode, Vanessa Liu shares with us her career journey that took her from dreams of being an astronaut to becoming a Harvard lawyer and then becoming a senior executive in digital media and technology innovation. No matter what her role has been, Vanessa has always been at the forefront of innovation and building businesses. Vanessa is the VP of SAP.io, a global organization responsible for building an ecosystem of startups around SAP. In her role, she's overseeing SAP.io's North American Foundries in New York and San Francisco, including programs devoted to women and diverse-led B2B enterprise tech companies. In this episode, Vanessa shares how following her passion for creating things and her purpose of creating impact has led to her extraordinary career achievements and a deeply fulfilling journey. Visit I'mBeyondBarriers.com where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best way to get in touch with Vanessa. Hey, Vanessa, welcome. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited as well.
Well, this is going to be a fun conversation because we have so much to chat about, and I want to dive right in and understand from you your formation story. Tell us about how you came about to this point in your life.
Yeah, my formation story. So I am a born and bred New Yorker. I was born at NYU on 34th Street and to immigrant parents. So my parents are both from Hong Kong. And just like many other immigrants, when they came over, they gave up so much of what they had from a skills perspective behind. And so both my parents were educators when they were in Hong Kong. When they came over, they had completely different areas to go into. My mother, just coming here following my father, decided that she was going to start off as an executive assistant. She was like the most overqualified executive assistant. And then decided to start a series of small businesses just to help us while my dad decided to go back to law school. And so it began many, many years in which my younger brother and I would spend our weekends helping out at our family stores. And so we would go to a flea market out in Queens and have a booth where we sold watches and sunglasses and toys. And my mother also had a jewelry shop on 59th Street and then a toy shop on 34th Street. And so that was what I would do. Like during the week, obviously, I would go to school. On weekends, my brother and I would man the showcases and like ask people, can I help you? And, get the change done at the cash register. And I remember thinking distinctively how I never wanted to go into business because it was such a hard life. Like I remember distinctly thinking that and just looking at my parents and how hard they worked. And it was something that I remember just being shy about because I felt like they worked so hard and it was very hard to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. And when I was young, it was also when I caught the innovation bug. So while I was helping out my parents on the weekends during school, I was very into the sciences. I thought I was going to become an astronaut. And so that was what I was spending my time doing. Wow. And was working at labs by the time I was in high school and doing neuroscience research up at Mount Sinai Hospital. And I was lucky enough to go to Harvard. And I was still on the path of going into the sciences, thinking that that was going to be my calling. And it was only around senior year when I realized, looking back, I was just like, oh no, I've been working now at that point. I'd been in labs for about 6 years of my life. I had since starting in sophomore year in high school and just thinking that if I look at the work that I've done, I've made a tiny impact. Is it going to be like that for the rest of my life? Is that what science means? That you can see how you can make incredible contributions, but they only moved the needle a little bit. And I realized that that wasn't enough for me. And it wasn't just the goal of being an astronaut that was enough for me. So much of it was, what is that final impact at the end of the day? So I started meandering. I got a fellowship to research the War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia after college. And I thought international law and human rights law was going to be it. That's very different from neuroscience and cutting into rat and mice brains. Right. And at the end of that year, I realized, okay, that's not it either, because I don't want to look at problems after they've happened and then litigate that. I want to be a part of the solution instead. Mm-hmm. And then I decided that business actually was the better place. And I found myself applying to a consulting firm. I applied to McKinsey. I got an offer a week before law school started. And so I did my first year of law school and I had gone back to Harvard and then decided to go back to McKinsey. And I started working for McKinsey in Amsterdam. And I thought I was only going to stay 2 years. I ended up staying close to 9 years because I fell in love with the work that I was doing and in media and basically anything to do with digital businesses. And that was what I was doing for my clients. And here I am many years later, having, after McKinsey, founded a couple of companies in the digital space. And then now at SAP, that thread of innovation has always been there. I could pinpoint it to when I was 14. It just has manifested itself in so many different ways. And I always joke that, just saying that I didn't want to go into business, looking at my parents' businesses, and look at me now, I'm firmly in business. And I'm just so proud of my parents, just seeing how they have evolved their businesses. So they're both entrepreneurs. My father, since the time we were children, so after going back to law school, he has his own small practice in Chinatown, even though he's just turned 80. And my mother, she bedazzles things with Swarovski crystals nowadays and works with many brands like Moet Hennessy and creates tracksuits for the Spice Girls for their reunion tour. And she was also part of the Swarovski Supreme collaboration where she blinged out all of their t-shirts. And so I look at that and I look at how much we've all evolved, and it just makes me smile.
Oh, that's such a beautiful story. It's also fascinating to me how through all of those switches, all the switching lanes that you did throughout, from where you started off growing up and helping your parents with their small business and thinking you'd never go into business, to then, pursuing science and then switching from that to law to business and consulting, and now at SAP and being, leading the investments and all of that. It's the through line, though, as you mentioned, is about your passion for innovation, and I assume a natural curiosity that has driven you through that. However, I'm also interested to know, what did you face fears as you were going from one thing to another? Because it's one thing to find your way and find success eventually, but it's quite another at that moment, that tipping point where you're questioning yourself and saying, this isn't quite it. Is there something else? Or maybe, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I can explore that. Did you face fears? And if so, how did you overcome it to finally pursue the next thing?
Yeah, so I've always been not a person who is fearful of anything. The unknown is even more attractive to me than the known, which is something that I think about a lot, because I'm always thinking, well, is the grass greener on the other side? Like, I want to discover what that is, and I want to see what that is. And also maybe a part of it is because I've been very clear in terms of what impact I want to have. And when I have that at the core and I think about that, and I could think about how I can do that, I only get scared of when I look at other people who try to do it and think like, oh my gosh, they've had such a really hard time. Luckily, I don't do that type of research until many, many months or years after the fact. And maybe it's just ignorance. Yeah. And I think it's, like, I just feel like there's so many different paths to what you can do. And if you strike upon something that feels right from an impact perspective, that you feel like you are in a state of flow because you know that your contributions are making a difference, and you can get comfortable with that and you get better and better and better at it. I know that there will always be, better ways of doing what it is that I'm doing, but I really enjoy the path and the journey that I take, which takes a lot of the fear away.
It's focused on the adventure of the experience rather than the fear of not making it to a certain destination. I think removing that expectation also puts the focus on something different.
Right.
What would you describe as your superpower, and how did you figure it out?
I would think that my strengths lie in connecting with people and being very lucky to have had that from an early age. I think about when for the many years I wanted to become an astronaut, my role model was the late Dave Walker, who commanded many space shuttle missions. And so he was part of a delegation that I was a part of when I was 14 years old, where 10 students were picked to go to what was then the USSR and to visit Star City, so their version of mission control. And I remember, it wasn't just like the trip that we had together for many years up until he passed in 2001. He was my mentor. Like having that type of special connection early on really shaped who I was. And I was also, such so lucky to have had similar mentors at McKinsey. Like I think about my mentor Wendy Becker when I was there, Menno van Dijk when I was there, and like other people that I've worked with along the way, like Steve Hasker, who is currently the CEO of Thomson Reuters. I've been so blessed to have been able to work with such amazing people. And going back to the point of just really enjoying the journey, for me, it's about connecting with people and really just cherishing those types of relationships. And that really drives me in everything that I do.
That's amazing. So you and I have talked about identity and our awareness of identity, or sometimes not even being conscious of our identity as we've navigated our careers. Tell our listeners a little bit more about that. What was that like for you as as a woman of color, with immigrant parents, who has achieved a lot and has very impressive credentials, and has frankly broken through all kinds of ceilings? Were you aware of your identity, or was that something you became aware of later? And did you face any internal, external roadblocks as you navigated your career?
So it's something that I think about a lot, because how I view my identity has evolved so much. So when I was growing up in New York, I looked around me, everybody was the son or daughter of immigrant parents. And so I felt like, okay, everybody is the same. I went to a high school where we were 55% Asian American, and we had very common backgrounds. And it was only when I went to college and I realized, okay, this is very different. There were people from all different types of backgrounds, like backgrounds that were very privileged that I'd never been exposed to. But then I didn't identify just with my Asian American background. I remember thinking like, okay, I have all these friends. They're so active with like the Asian American Association on campus. And I just felt like, yeah, that's me, but that's not really me. Like the person who I am is, that nerd who's going to labs and like thinking about the sciences. And that was like who I was. And I was so focused on that. And then when I started working at McKinsey, I started working in the Amsterdam office, and it's not a place where there are a lot of Asian Americans running around. And I was obviously different, but because I was so different from others, it was just accepted. I just remember walking around the office, and I'm 5'4", I'm not very tall, but the average height in that office was probably 5'10", women and men included. So I was always craning my neck. And if anything, they would say like, gosh, you didn't drink enough milk when you were growing up. and so like, yeah, I was obviously different, but it wasn't my identity. I was known as the American consultant who happened to be Asian. And I spent so many years in Europe, and it was when I came back, and that was like around 2009, 2010. And mind you, this was like the first time in my adulthood that I was living in the United States again. Did I realize just how much of an identity it was to be Chinese American and to really embrace that, because I started realizing that there were a lot of people coming to me for advice and sharing about how they had hit roadblocks and ceilings and how to navigate that. And I felt that, my goodness, like I want to help. I want to be able to help them. And if I fast forward to today's world, where if you look at statistics just in terms of people of color who are in the corporate world, and the demographic that is least likely to get promoted is actually an East Asian female. And I remember reading that, I was just like, wait, that's me. That's me. and I just now feel like it's so important to make our voices heard. Like, how could that be? And understanding what that means and what that could lead to has really become a passion area for me. But it took many years.
I'm curious about that statistic and the cause behind that. Could you share a little bit more about that? Because it's, especially as someone who's obviously broken through that and is in the minority of that statistic. So what are some of the things that hold women back, especially, East Asian women?
It's several factors. I think it's, I could think of three off of the top of my head. I think there's one, which is the lack of access to different types of mentors. And I think that's how I was really different. I had mentors from all different backgrounds when I started off my career. But a lot of the times, I think women in general find it that much harder to find mentors. And I think like East Asian women, just being like culturally, you just don't speak up as often. You don't ask for those types of opportunities. That just like sets you back. And so I think we all know the importance of the connections that you have and the network that you build. Like that's so critical to have sponsors who can really bring you up. If you're not visible, because you're not asking for that opportunity, or you're not going for that coffee chat, you're not going to be able to cultivate those types of relationships. So that's like number one. I think in general, we're not taught that. If I look back, I don't think I was really taught that even when I was at McKinsey. I think I only learned that from my business partner, who I launched a couple of businesses with, and watching him, how he was so good at nurturing his relationships. That taught me so much. So that's one, just being able to have role models for that. I think secondly too, I think a lot of women in general, and East Asian women certainly for sure, your head's down doing your work. You're not trying to get credit. But what you find is that other people are very good at showing that they are doing the work, making that visible so that they are known by the time promotion time comes around, right?
That level of self-advocacy that's important. Yeah. So you're not just doing your job, you're actually managing a career in a responsible way. Not being heads down and just getting it done, and nobody has any idea that you were the horsepower behind it.
That's right. And I think self-advocacy, being able to do that is just as important, because otherwise you won't be recognized. And I see so many people who do the great work. I'm like, well, do your team members know about this? Does your boss know about this? It's really important. And I learned that the hard way, like for the longest time. But I was lucky. I was in an environment where it was very encouraged to show your work in a consulting firm. But it's not like that in in many parts of the corporate world. So that's the second area. And I think like the third area too, just in terms of the, the idea that I think East Asians in particular, they're viewed as, incredibly hardworking. They get the jobs in the entry levels and maybe middle management. And that's where they get stuck. And it's not a visible problem because there are so many Asians coming up in the early tranches of the types of like the job rungs. Mm-hmm. But then they don't see like the promotions are not happening. And so that's like where there are, if you even look at like ENGs at large corporates, very rarely do you see a very big group around Asian Americans. Asian Americans, it's usually like South Asians and East Asians. South Asians are actually incredibly good at creating a network. East mm-hmm. Asians are not very good at that. So those mm-hmm. are the three things that I see are part of the problem, but I think there's so many other factors too.
That's very well put. So find mentors and sponsors. Make sure you're advocating for yourself and showcasing your work, not just doing your job and being responsible in managing a career. And thirdly, being conscious of not getting stuck in the frozen middle. And I think that's where a lot of women tend to hit the career speed bump, the mid-career speed bump, right? Where there's increasing personal responsibility, marriage, motherhood, and so forth, but also more complexity in your job. And if you don't know how to navigate through that, you might get stuck in middle management, being incredibly good at that, but never breaking through. And so much of the research shows that is a problem that these problems plague all women across demographics, but certainly it's more pronounced in certain segments, as you've noted. What has helped you specifically in terms of finding great mentors and having the support and advocacy of mentors and sponsors?
I think for me, so much of it is connecting with people in a really deep way. And I always think that the best relationships are those where it's so nurturing in both directions. I think a lot of people always think like, oh, I want to have a mentor and like this is like what I want from that mentor, but they're not really thinking about it the other way around. Like what's going to make it really exciting for that person? So
build a real relationship, not just think if it is, something that you're taking, but really like a friendship. I mean, it has to be both ways.
Exactly right. It's a true friendship at the end of the day. And like I feel like so blessed to be able to have those types of relationships where I always want to help the people around me. Like I think that's just in my nature, and I think that's a big part. Like what can you give to the relationship so that it's just as fulfilling for them as it is for you.
I have a very tactical follow-up to that point, which is I've come across very promising, high, ambitious young women that have a certain mentor or person in mind as a mentor or a potential sponsor, but they literally don't know how to approach them, or they're afraid to. Tactically speaking, what advice would you give and how to go about that?
I would, so if there's a particular person that you're very excited to work with, and I would say, what is that person now going through? What could be some pain points in their career right now, or in their personal life right now, that you can, offer a different perspective to. This is something that I tell people who I mentor too, and who, are just starting their careers. And I tell them like, look, this relationship is it's just as important to me as it is for you, because like they're able to provide me a perspective that I just don't have. And to really understand that, I think young people, you like the young people when I first mentor, they're just like, well, I just didn't know what I can offer. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because there's so much. Like, we're building a business right now. Your friends could be great people for us to recruit. Like, thinking about that, from a point of view of that perspective, or how can we tap into that particular demographic, because that's like part of our business, for instance. Like, there are always so many things that you can bring to the table. So it's just about doing your homework to understand what that person might be going through.
And don't think less of yourself, like you've got nothing to bring to the table.
That's right.
Be aware of your own strengths and, what resources you might be, or perspective you might be able to share with your mentor. So, focus on building an authentic connection, and the rest will come with that.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Speaking about the mid-career speed bump, part of that tends to happen because women become incredibly effective in doing sort of the kind of non-glamorous projects that are essential, but aren't exactly the fast track to senior roles, because they're not the most visible and they don't really provide the right opportunities to flex your muscles and showcase what you're capable of. What has helped you in doing that? And then again, how would you help someone navigate if they're stuck in that position?
So it's more the mindset that you need to have, right? Mm-hmm. If as you are going up the ladder, like within a large organization, or you're starting your own business, what is it like to be an employer and to put on the employer's hat? And that was something really important to me. I remember when my mentor sat me down, it was just like, you're becoming a manager now. Do you know what this means? Like, do you know what mindset you need to have? You need to look at things differently. Like, you're so good at coaching people, but you're not good at being tough on them when you need to. This was like early on. I remember when I was first managing a project and everything was late because I just assumed everybody was going to deliver on time and I wasn't good at staying on top of people. And he was like, this is what happened because you just were too nice. You just assumed everybody was going to, meet your deadline. You didn't think that might not happen, that think that, oh no, this person actually doesn't have it. And so you have to think about what will it take to make this whole entire business run. And that's a different perspective. And that's when you realize like, oh, what I'm doing, yes, it's really essential. However, I also need to make sure that I do X, Y, and Z because that's just as important. And to look at the people who do succeed in the organization, what has made them succeed? What is it that they're famous for? And understanding that. Because it's all, at the end of the day, every place has its own culture. And some organizations, like for instance, put a huge premium on sales and marketing. If you're in a sales and marketing type of organization and you're only doing operations, you're never going to,
you're not in the right lane to fast track.
You're not in the right lane. Yeah, you're not in the right lane. And you might not realize that, even though you're so good at that. And it's important then to take a step back and be like, what makes this place tick? And is this also a place for me? And that's something that is just as important. I think so many people just think like, oh gosh, like I need this role. It's yes, of course, like you want to make sure that you are able to make ends meet. But it's a two-way street. Make sure that this works for you as well.
Yeah. You brought up such an important point about recognizing what drives that particular organization, because you're absolutely right. I mean, some organizations are incredibly brand oriented. Brand is what drives that. Others are all about fiscal discipline, and yet others are about supply chain, mastery. And if what your superpower isn't aligned with what is unique about that organization, then you're never really going to be a shining star there, because what they value is different from what your strengths are. And that frankly is a great point to think about and say, maybe my superpower is best leveraged at an organization that actually values that. and make your way to one that, unless you have the ability to develop the skills that it values.
Right. And that's something that you really want to do. But I think the exercise of, number one, understanding what is your superpower, matching that with organizations that also value that is equally important. Mm-hmm. And also, if there's no organization out there that really fits the bill, then that might mean that you need to start your own.
Maybe, you've got to cover some, either start your own or develop the skills that you need to become more valuable in the marketplace. But bottom line, you can't win against the market or against the wave. So the only way to do it is to ride the wave and find the right wave for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
As in your role today, describe for us more about what that entails and what your responsibilities are.
SAP.io is the early stage venture arm for SAP. So we're a large enterprise technology company. We have our roots where we started about 48 years ago when 5 men came over from IUM and started SAP, realized that there was like a really big opportunity in the marketplace to help businesses run much more smoothly by creating an enterprise resource planning system where you can understand your inventory and how that tied into your bottom line. And it's really expanded since. And SAP.io being the early stage venture arm, we've been around for about 3 years. We consist of a fund where we make investments in seed and Series A stage companies, and all in enterprise tech. And so anything from HR tech to supply chain to like the next generation ERP solution, data analytics, that's our bread and butter. And then we run these accelerator programs in 8 locations globally. These are no equity, no investment accelerator programs, which we run twice a year around a specific theme. So we have a current theme right now in New York around retail. We've done ones in HR tech before and sustainability. And it's an open call for companies that are late C to Series C to work together with us to get onto our platforms and our products as a part of our ecosystem, and then we go to market together. So it's I love it because we work with amazing entrepreneurs, and we also have a commitment where at least 40% of the companies we work with on the fund or on the accelerator side are companies founded by underrepresented founders. It's something that I am so passionate about. It's the reason why I came to SAP, because I just realized that when it comes to thinking about technology in the future and enterprise technology, and you're thinking about, yes, we're going to make technology better, but better for whom? You really have to think about that. And the only way you're going to really have something compelling is if you are thinking about all different segments through the lens of enterprise technology. And I'm very excited to have fantastic founders to work with alongside all of these spaces that are in areas that are probably not as sexy as your consumer company, but they're incredibly impactful from a revenue standpoint and just from like a business standpoint.
Absolutely. And it's incredibly interesting approach of how that is done, but also the representation that you're ensuring is reflected in the programs as well. So given your role and the unique vantage point that you have, what are some of the things that you see as different between male founders, female founders, or especially female founders of color, perhaps, that you would give advice to someone listening to say, be aware of this, or tap into this as something that's going for you, or be aware of showing up like this?
It's just looking at our founders, we spend quite a lot of time helping them, number one, with their sales pitch, and how a lot of the times I think founders in particular, especially ones that have that engineering product background, they think, okay, I'm typically like the only person of color and also like the only women engineer ever that I've worked with, and this is my technology is so great, and that's all that they're focused on. I'm like, no, actually people are interested in the story around how this company came to be. What pain point did you see? What aspect do you have that is different from other people? That is what's compelling. That's number one. Number two, a lot of our women founders and underrepresented founders, they're not good at marketing. They're typically, even more under-resourced and understaffed than other startups because they haven't raised a big round and they haven't been able to do that. And so they find themselves always just trying to do the work, have that incremental win. And I always tell them, you have to take a step back and you have to think about, number one, how can you be smarter from a distribution standpoint? How can you be smarter so that you can create something where you can be known for this and that can scale? Because you can keep on working incredibly hard for these small wins, but if you do not tap into that big channel partnership or invest in making those connections, you're not going to get very far. So that's something that we spend an inordinate amount of time with, which is, can we help you craft a network of customers around you? We can use the SAP, the SAP strength and the breadth of our network to help you do that. So there are things that we work on again and again and again. It pains me whenever we have our founders coming in and then we're trying to promote them when we do a first press release on a particular program. Sometimes we're just okay, great. Of course, everybody has a website. I mean, these are companies that are at least seed, right? But they don't have a Twitter account. They don't have, they've never done anything on a content marketing side. Not that marketing is everything, but you need to be able to tell your story so that other people can understand it.
Well, as an entrepreneur myself and a founder of multiple businesses and a woman of color, I can relate to everything you've described because I've learned it the hard way. And now when I look back to the last several years of building businesses, the biggest thing that comes to mind is leverage, whether it's leverage of relationships or technology or distribution partnerships. Just something about look back to the times when I used to think, no, I have to figure this all out myself, and when I'm doing better, then I'll go ask for help or that, so that tends to become a mental roadblock to even thinking, well, actually this is a great business model. It has huge potential. It's going to create massive impact. Let's get other people together and also raise the capital to do it.
That's right. I think the leverage point is such an important one. We all have the same asset, which is in terms of time, 24 hours in a day. It's about how do you spend it and can you spend it wisely so it goes well beyond the amount of time you can put into it.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your point of view about any systemic bias or challenges that women face in terms of raising capital? Folks like Ellen Powell, very vocal in speaking about it, and especially in, the traditional VC world and all of that. How can a female founder navigate through that and still be able to raise a healthy round instead of going for the incremental bits that frankly end up in many ways paralyzing you?
Right. I think the climate has changed so much over the last few years. Obviously, this is a very different time now that we're in the midst of a pandemic. But the last few years, just in terms of the spotlight on the inequities in the venture capital market, how there are so many fantastic companies that are overlooked because they don't have the right access to networks. The great thing is that for many female founders, there are many more funds and investors who are really interested in investing in companies backed by people who haven't been backed before and who have different ideas. But you have to get access to those networks and really figure out where to tap into. And you're right, the whole aspect, and you were just talking about that a little bit, where you felt yourself that you had to get something perfect or, to do things yourself before you went out. That's something that we see again and again and again with women founders, that when they ask and decide, like, this is the use of funds, it's always very conservative. They don't want to go out and raise even more. And then we're always just saying, well, you should be 2xing or 3xing that, because what if this happens? What if that happens? What if, like, you don't have the ability to delegate, to delegate? You need to be able to make sure you have enough resources. And so it is about not being afraid to ask for more, and to test that with the people around you. Like, I always encourage our companies to have like friendly investors to talk to, who might not be investing in that particular segment, but people who are very willing to give advice, to seek that advice out early so that they can give you feedback. There are many resources that allow you to do that, from like Springboard does that, or Golden Seeds, they do that, but there are also investors out there who are just like incredible allies and want to help change the ratio. So take full advantage of that.
And that's great advice, even for someone who may be in a corporate role, which is just as important, is get feedback, get help, get advice, and don't be afraid to ask for help even before you need it. Don't wait until it's too late, because time is a precious resource. And if you're working that hard and you're losing the opportunity to gain momentum, you're holding yourself back.
That's exactly right. I think asking for help is one thing that a lot of people and a lot of women, and I've also felt that in the past, like I was reluctant to ask for help. I would think, oh, that's a sign of weakness. It's not. It means that you know yourself well, and that you know where you need help. And that's great. That means that you can grow. You have a growth mindset.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're in the midst of a pandemic right now, and one of the things that has occurred as a result of that is digital transformation has accelerated. I was reading this really interesting quote that said, who facilitated digital transformation within your organization? The CEO, the CIO, or COVID?
I know what I'd pick.
And it really has. What changes we thought would take maybe 5, or in some traditional industries, maybe even 10 years to occur, have really been ignited and catalyzed by this sudden disruption. When you look into the future, what are you excited about seeing that's different, and what do you hope that remains the same?
So I'll separate that into 2 areas. So just like from a business standpoint, what I'm really excited about, and also just from a personal standpoint, what I'm really excited about. Like from a business standpoint, I think digital transformation obviously has been, as we pointed out, truly accelerated. I think there are so many industries where they were, on their paths, but we're going to take a very long time to get there. I think that is going to be such a big transformation, just in terms of artificial intelligence and how you can make that help you hone and do things in a better way. If you think about retail and how many stores are going to have to be contactless, right? Like, are they going to look like the Amazon Goes, where you could go in, take things off the shelves, you don't even see somebody at the cash register? And that's like what all the news reports are saying, that's like the most dangerous part of a grocery store right now, right? Is at the checkout counter. And thinking about things that can happen as a result of that, I think that it'll only benefit consumers, that it'll provide more choice in that way. And so I am excited for the digital transformation and what can happen from that. I am, of course, though, afraid of the economic impact of what's been going on. Just the job loss. The job loss is just incredible. And every single week. I mean, those numbers are just ever increasing. And if you think about how are we going to recover from that, I think so much about the small businesses. And I think that we need to, as a society and hopefully as a government, think about how do you preserve small businesses. That's what, I mean, it makes this country run. It makes so many other places run. And that creates the unique fabric of our society. And thinking about how they can also benefit from digital transformation is really important. And so that's something I've just been wrapping my heads around. Don't have an answer to that. Mm-hmm. From a personal perspective, now I'm thankful that I'm in a place where I'm sheltering in place with my parents and my children and my husband. And I am so grateful for the fact that we have every single meal together. We are doing so much together. I want to hold on to that as much as I can. And this is so special. And I want to make sure that we preserve this in some way going forward, that we don't go back to how we were living before, which was like, yes, we have to run to this soccer game or that activity. And, oh yes, mom and dad, I'll see you on Sunday for a very quick dinner. Being in the moment is so important, and I just don't want to lose that.
Oh, that's beautiful. You mentioned, sheltering in place with your parents and your kids, and that's sort of the double responsibility of elder care and child care at the same time as managing a very demanding career and important role. What has helped you be effective, and how are you keeping sane?
Yeah. So from the first few weeks, I won't lie, they were so hard. They were so hard because we were all so worried about our health because we were exposed. And so that waiting time was incredibly difficult, and work became a distraction. Just being able to pour my heart and soul into the work that I do with founders really helped so much. And then now over time, what's really been great, I think it's the importance of finding time for yourself. I know that everybody is really struggling with that. How do you find your own time when you're surrounded by your family members, however loving they are? And so I've discovered for me, my sanity, my form of meditation is, being active every day. I try to do something active, in a form of a HIIT workout that I do with online trainers, that basically gyms that I've frequented, and I want them to stay in business. And so that's really keeping me sane. Just like everybody else, picked up a lot of baking, have my 2 sourdough starters that I feed.
Yeah, baking has almost become like a national pastime suddenly.
It really has. There's something so fulfilling.
Yeah. I've had more cake and more homemade bread and muffins than I ever thought were possible in a month.
It's so true. I was like, okay, well, there goes the diet. It's totally fine. This is about comfort. And this is about just you want a hug. I think what we're all missing is in the physicality of our relationships. And so eating baked goods is definitely a form of that. And also just taking the time to read and to listen to people. And I've definitely stepped it up in terms of the podcasts that I'm listening to, and also just in terms of articles not related to COVID to read. I think it's really important so that you could stay positive. I think that's the name of the game, is how do you stay positive, and having those Zoom chats with friends that you haven't been in touch with. That has been really such a gift in this time.
So true, right? It's even in the midst of physical distancing, there's been a deeper social connection and a deeper personal connection, meaning for everyone during this time. And there's so much to be learned from this experience that I think we'll carry for the rest of our lives.
That's right.
Well, Vanessa, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I'm so glad our paths crossed, and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and insights for everybody listening in. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki.
Thanks for listening. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources referenced in this episode. And be sure to take the quiz on the website. Your score will tell you where you are, what helps you gain momentum, and what holds you back. You'll also get a free guide with cutting-edge career strategies. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your comments and topic suggestions on IamBeyondBarriers.com. and we'll be sure to address them in future episodes. If you enjoyed our show today, please subscribe and rate the podcast, or just tell a friend about it. See you next episode.